Hello, product people. Welcome to the Product for Product podcast, hosted by Matt Green, data advocate and product manager, and Moshe product leader and author. Our goal is to serve the product community by helping you find products that can help make your work in product management easier. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Product for Product podcast.
Welcome back. On today's episode, Moshe and I are excited to be speaking with Kevin Hawkins again for our series on user testing platforms. Let's jump right into discussing more products you use, Kevin, in your day-to-day work.
Happy to be back. Just a little recap. So I'm the Global UX Director for Glovo. We currently use a mixture of UserZoom, which is actually owned by UserTesting. We previously were on Maze, but I've worked with UserTesting and UsabilityHub a lot in the past. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Hey, awesome. Kevin, welcome again, and thank you again for sharing with us more of those products. And I can tell you that after last week's episode, I was very much the thoughts in my head about this entire ecosystem of products got much more clear. I listened to our kickoff episode. Because that's where we usually talk, just Matt and I, about what we know about these products and what we think we are going to learn about these products. And I think that now our summary is going to be way more organized summary episode, because you really put in order there for us, what are the main things that needs to be in these products, or what is almost the full ecosystem, starting from panels of people and then going into moderated and unmoderated tests, conducting the test, then storage and analysis of the test, and at the end, repositories of all the different things that we get from people. So that was really great. So today you mentioned two products, user testing and UsabilityHub, that we're going to talk about. Yep. By all means, if you also want to compare them a bit with Maze and
UserZoom.
UserZoom. Thank you. And I believe that user testing also bought UserZoom. So now it's part of the same company, but it's still two separate products. So it will be interesting also to explain, or maybe if you know why they bought them and what was the reasoning behind it, and how does it impact those products. But yes, we are focusing today on user testing and on UsabilityHub. So let's start with panels. How are they doing with panels, these two products?
I think user testing has become quickly the largest platform, especially through acquisition. They have really, really huge clients. I think they have some of the best feature combinations in the business through acquisition. They have a really big panel because of this. So they, I believe, are over 1 million. Maybe even reaching 2 million, just because of acquisitions in different markets. The panels they've acquired don't overlap as much, so they've been able to grow kind of incrementally, which is very nice. Meanwhile, UsabilityHub, I think, took a very strong, growth kind of strategy, focusing on nonprofits and startups. So while their panel is a bit smaller, I would say a little over 500,000, they have a lot of diversity in their panel because they've had to work with, educators and companies that are targeting niche audiences. And so sometimes you can find your audience that you're looking for much quicker in UsabilityHub.
Do you know how many UsabilityHub have, or is it even a known number out there? Do they mention it?
Some companies like to put a number out there. I mean, they don't update them very often. It's over 500,000 in UsabilityHub. I think user testing is somewhere between 2 to 4 times their size. However, the markets you're targeting determine, how much the panel really helps you. Some countries, if the panel is new, if the country that the company is from is a different continent, they generally have less people, but it just depends on who you're targeting.
So if I had a specific product or specific targets that I need, which one would be good for me to go with UsabilityHub versus going with user testing?
Question. I think UsabilityHub has more diversity outside of the North American market. I think user testing has really strong depth in all of their markets, but the most being North America. So I would say if you are going for a niche audience, In the US, user testing is going to win because they have that depth. So you can probably find a niche audience much faster. The Usability Hub has more diversity in terms of if you're doing international research, especially in the EU, especially if you're looking for people who speak a different language and don't speak English. Usability Hub seems to be winning on that side.
I was digging into this actually, looking at it between Usability Hub and user testing. To join a panel, you have to submit like basically an application and answer some questions and stuff. So it sounds more in depth. And then I looked over at Usability Hub. They use a company called UserCrowd, but it does reference like we prefer ordinary people. And so that kind of stood out to me, that you don't have to maybe go through all the application process, and maybe they're looking for a broader audience.
Yeah, there's this thing about like ordinary people versus like niche. Like I would say when you're in B2B products, B2B2C, you're looking a lot at companies that are targeting the employees of certain kinds of companies. Those are not your everyday people generally, because these companies are smaller companies or they're from legacy brands. But of course, those don't represent the majority of companies out there. Whereas Usability Hub, you can find you can find plumbers, you can find nannies and daycare center, so it's much easier if you're targeting like well-known jobs that are maybe just not, tech savvy. You don't have to go through a pool of professional testers. You're getting closer to who you would get in an A/B test.
Yeah.
The one other point about it is that you don't necessarily have to choose one over the other. You might need both if you want to test different things. So if you want to test in Europe and then you expand to the US or vice versa, then you might just pick both products just because of that. But this is just the panels, right? So let's move now to moderate and unmoderated versus unmoderated. Which one do they do, and how do they perform on that?
Okay, so I will talk about user testing for the rest of this in isolation from the acquisition of UserZoom and Enjoy HQ, because it would bias this heavily towards user testing. User testing solely as a platform is the most comprehensive for moderated, I would say. And this is what you're going to see a lot of in all our videos. It's going to be like video conversations, real time. You're going to see a lot of, in-depth analysis and breakdown. Yes, they have the recorded sessions, but they really, really came from live interviews, and that's their bread and butter. And they have really good tracking technology to kind of get data out of the recordings from interviews, but they expect you to be there in terms of the way they built the product. In Usability Hub is majorly remote, unmoderated. So you have the choice, but the way they've set up their panel and the way they've set up the tool, it really biases towards you not being present because they're going for speed. So, they're trying to promise results in like 2 to 3 hours, as low as 20 minutes. They're not expecting you to talk to everyone. They're trying to run simultaneous, unmoderated tests.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because the only experience I had with user testing was actually with unmoderated. So they do support also unmoderated one, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But you're saying that their focus or strength is more with the moderated ones.
Yeah, they push what they call live conversations. It's the oldest feature they've had. It's in all their plans. They make it, I would say, seem like the place where they're investing the most in the product. And it is, I guess, like the beginning of their legacy. So I think it makes more sense for them to have more features there because that's where they started. Whereas Usability Hub almost focus holistically on usability testing at the beginning, which you don't need to have live interviews for. And so that their biggest tech stack or feature stack is on that side.
That's interesting. Yeah. You see it in other products also, how different companies start in different areas of the same problem, and then they kind of focus on that. They're very good at that, and they start going to other areas, and then they start overlapping, but it's still a bit different. So can you describe some of those features to our audience? That will be really interesting, like some of the really key features on user testing for the unattended and moderated. And you see, I learned some new terms last week, trying to use them. And I don't know why I still have this attended and unattended in my head, but the moderated, and then Usability Hub for unmoderated.
Yeah, certainly. So user testing has, again, the most comprehensive features on moderated. So they have a series of what they call networks where you can get professionals from the industry of certain companies you're looking for. You can get, non-professionals or kind of the everyday person. They actually have a recruiting firm where they will go out and actually specifically recruit for you. They have an entire service line around maintaining a recruitment panel and pool and focus group for your company at all times. So again, very robust when it comes to that collection of people. When it comes to the kind of types of tests you can run, again, the most comprehensive. The depth is on live interviews and I would say recorded kind of like task completion, but they also, of course, have usability testing, brand messaging testing, card sorting. They have the full suite. They have a lot of templates, but they also have a lot of like really cool like education around like how to remove bias, how to look for like body language, how to share really important insights from the middle of interviews to stakeholders or executives. And so they use lots of data and machine learning to kind of make it easier to synthesize.
Mm-hmm. I noticed one of the features that stood out to me with user testing was the ability to watch, your testers like live use it, and they can be remote, they don't have to be in person, but the actual video it and then collect the data from those sessions. So, are you able to speak a little more to that? I didn't see that on the usability hub side.
Yeah, this is exclusively for them. Both user testing by themselves and the acquisition of UserZoom have this feature. So it's going to be pretty comprehensive when they combine them. You can watch the playback of recordings on most platforms. However, generally when you do an unmoderated, you are not allowed to be there. They have, and also UserZoom has, this kind of what they call shadowing, where you are incognito and you can watch a session when the participant is going through a task and they don't know you're there.
It's like behind the mirrored glass in the police station or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
you watch it live or you watch it a recording?
Both. So the recording is more common. The live is the really unique functionality because obviously when you send out the survey and people start talking, they're tracking it. So they know when someone is taking it. And if you've sent out the survey in the last half an hour and someone has accepted it, I mean, if you're still around your computer, you can just hop in and actually watch the session, which is not very different than how it used to be back in the day. Like when we had usability or testing labs, you'd be behind a two-way glass with like note takers and sticky notes in your team, and people would be doing eye tracking using your product.
Yeah, I never had the opportunity to experience that, but I worked with a product manager in the past that did that at, I think it was Kijiji. Well, you guys won't know Kijiji. It's like the Craigslist for Canada.
The eBay. Yeah.
Yeah, eBay bought them, I think, or something like that. But he told me how they set up all of this operation with rooms and cameras. I think it wasn't a glass, but cameras. So different cameras all around and people watching. So I almost tried to set up once something like that, actually, in one of the places I worked, but I didn't have a budget for it. I had the room, but not the budget.
Exactly.
Now, if we talk about the unmoderated one, I always wondered, how is it working with my design? So if I'm designing or my designer is designing a few options for my product, let's say on Figma, how do they get, is it an integration? Do I have to upload them over there? This type of setup, I never seen how they set it up. I just been on the end of seeing the test happening. So Can you explain that a bit, how the mechanics work there usually?
Yeah, so UsabilityHub has been, I wouldn't say that they're the best, if not the second best at the integration. So Figma has been really investing in their API for a while. So they have for a while just been giving you link and permission control, similar to Google Drive and Google Docs, to your Figma prototypes and the different prototypes that can be nested within of it. But now they've gone further into trying to give API access to the touch points, to the little clickable areas in the prototype. So you can deep link, and you can go even further. And UsabilityHub has really, really taken advantage of this. So you can really granularly get metadata out of Figma through UsabilityHub now to see if someone clicked on the wrong, touch point, or clicked on the wrong touch area, or navigated and got confused. And so you almost get web level analytics on funnel and like the path they take and heat maps and scroll depth and all of that. And so Usability Hub really makes it much easier than having to like upload screenshots and recreate those touch areas and the paths. You really don't have to do that anymore. Whereas most platforms, including user testing, still make you do a bit of legwork.
I see. And the legwork is through the interface, or do you also have to have a developer helping you with that?
On user testing, you just get a lot less data. You get what Usability Hub you do, which is you just upload the link, and then essentially you don't get much data besides completion feedback, because user testing and most platforms were not integrated into Figma directly. So once you click that link and you went to Figma, they didn't know very much. What they knew is when the user came back, they gave a review and they said they completed the task. And of course, you could measure what was called the like completion screen in Figma. And so that would be the trigger to say that the person finished. But now they get details from every single screen in between. They can even tell success or partial success without actually having to, let's say, upload or have the actual Figma file uploaded into the system, which is a much better way to do it.
Yeah. And what I'm thinking, maybe because I like automation, that I'm leaning towards the unmoderated one. But what I'm thinking is also how deep those tests can go, like how many steps, and if you have a very complex design, would you have a recommendation to say, oh, don't go more than this number of steps, otherwise it will be too much for the user, or it will be too much for the system to handle?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is agnostic of the tooling. Anytime a user is going through more than one job to be done, you incur some bias, because at that point it's a multivariate test, because the success of the first task impacts the success of the second task because there's priming happening. So if there's frustration in the first task, there might not be frustration in the second task, but the user already feels frustration. So now you're going to read it in both. It might influence the success rate of the second task, even though the task might be perfectly usable and have no friction, but the user will perceive the entire flow now as having friction.
So this is for both moderated and non-moderated, or kind of rule of thumb?
Yeah, anytime you're doing usability, task completion, like behavioral research, it's better to kind of separate things either by jobs to be done or like flow milestones, as I call them. So let's say you have account creation or even checkout. You know how like most websites will break that into like a multi-step wizard, and they'll say like these are the 3 milestones. Like for checkout, it's first giving us all the items you're buying, then it's your credit card detail, then it's your address so that we can determine shipping costs. Then it's payment details, then it's confirmation. And so each of those have individual milestones, and you could test them separately. Testing them together, of course, makes sense. If the entire flow works, but you might need to identify that there's a problem to solve with collecting payment information, and it's only there. And the issue has nothing to do with address or,
That's a good example. Yeah, I'm thinking about a thing I did recently where I didn't, the billing address, where they say billing address is the same as shipping address. They didn't actually ask me that. Mm-hmm. So like I got a point of frustration there, is because I was like, hey, that my billing address and my shipping address are the same. But that's interesting. Like in that actual use case, in that one stage of the journey, to be able to test that is pretty cool. I wasn't thinking about that.
Yeah, I mean, you'll see it back in the results, but it's maybe a bit more inefficient, because let's say I test all 4. They're not different flows, but like let's say I test all 4 tasks at the same time. In the flow, the entire flow will fail. But I will now need to redo the entire test to see if, step 1, 3, and 4 succeed, even though I know it's just step 2 that failed. Whereas if you initially run your test as 4 separate tests, you keep the results of 1, 3, and 4. The development team gets to start doing work. You may maybe iterate on just step 2, and then you ship step 2. And so you kind of have a bit more flexibility. It's a bit more in line with continuous development than to kind of waterfall the entire workflow.
The interesting thing is, now that you're telling me this, I'm thinking about all of my user tests that I did in the past, and I think that many of them had more than one job to be done, and maybe all the results I got were not really good.
Reflection.
It's almost like in law when you find something about the lawyer that he did wrong, it's like everything that he dealt with might be bad as well, or persecution. All the cases have to be
Yeah,
reopened.
that's right. Exactly.
Normally, it's not that exact. I mean, generally, like
Maybe it's not life-threatening, but but who knows? There are some products out there that their testing is much more important because it is related to life-threatening solutions, right? But this is a very thought-provoking for me, and it just shows that as a product manager and not user research professional that focus only on that, there is so much I need still to learn about this, and why UX researchers and people like you are so important. Because you really have so much experience about doing these things, so you know what to look for and what are the things that biased users, right?
sometimes it's very small things. It's like just knowing the moment to test the entire flow or test just one screen, and then other times it's realizing that, oh, these questions are not producing the answers we want, and changing the entire script. And so sometimes you just don't know when to throw away the whole project, or maybe just one piece.
Yeah. So let's move now to the next thing, conducting the test. So we touched on it a bit, I think, with the moderated and non-moderated and the way the tests are presented to users. Is there anything there that we need to add on that with those both systems?
With conducting the test, I personally like the way UsabilityHub does audience segmentation. What it does is it changes the turnaround time live as you specify the audience you're trying to reach within a panel. And I really, really appreciate this, because this is one of the biggest pain points for both stakeholders and design and research teams, is not knowing how long research will take to be able to do capacity planning. So you'll say we can do 4 or 5 projects. We do some internal story pointing. So we say we can do this much because we have this many resources and this much time in the quarter or whatever the period is. And then you go look at the recruitment and you're like, oh, to get this super niche audience, I need 5 whole days to get turnaround time. And that delays all of the project because you're waiting to get the feedback, to get synthesized, to share out. And sometimes you don't know that, like you talk to a stakeholder, a PM or a designer or whoever, and they're like, oh yeah, we need this in 2 weeks. You agree to the 2 weeks because you're like, that's fine. And then suddenly you realize, oh wait, the audience you want to talk to is super hard to reach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting one as well. Reflecting on my past experience, when I need to find those users, I always go with like, if I need, let's say, 5 or 6 people to interview, I will try to reach out to 20 or 30, because I know that the number of people that will come back saying yes will be maybe in the best scenario will be maybe 10. Right. And then those that will actually show up will be less than that. Not everyone showing up to the test. Yeah. So it's really good to know, that they already have that cover. And then they based on, I'm sure their experience and the numbers, they can tell you how long it will take. So I do appreciate that. Now, next is about, storing and analysis of the tests. How each one of these companies are doing that?
Yes, and this is where again, user testing, the strength of acquisitions and a bit of their age helps them. So they have the best analysis on the market, I think I can say at this point. So even if you look at just user testing, the Human Insights platform by itself, it's great. But then in addition, having UserZoom, Enjoy HQ, and then their full kind of in-house service team makes it even better. You can do really light analysis built into the product, just like analytics, all the things I mentioned before, like heat mapping, depth, scroll depth, checking, friction, effort, lostness. But then they have lots of data machine learning that kind of goes through and tries to detect like things that you're not sure about. And so is this person lost, confused? Is there hesitation? Is there a rage click? Some of the kind of analytics you would see mostly on the product side, like in the coded product, they have on the prototype side, which is very nice as a prediction, leading indicator of what will happen in the real product. UsabilityHub, they do a really amazing job at, they record their sessions and then they break it down with the same data they have in Figma. When you're not doing prototype tests in Usability Hub, they don't have that richness. For, let's say, for example, with card sorting, design surveys, preference tests, you get pretty basic data. Whereas on usertesting.com, they always have that same rich AI engine running through your tests and looking for even just delays in the user going between question 2 and question 3 in a survey.
Yeah, that's exciting because I was actually just thinking about the movement with OpenAI. You mentioned machine learning, and the ability to identify things that we don't normally notice and be able to find patterns and usability. So are you seeing anything in these tools heading in that direction in terms of whether it's OpenAI or whether it's AI in general to identify these analytics and really build this out in the space in general?
Yeah, I would say Usability Hub is, again, because they're mostly focused on usability testing, it's a bit less data to run through. So it's visual analysis of people clicking, scrolling. They don't have as much rich commentary. So usertesting.com, because they have a lot more types of tests you can run and they're a bit older and they focus on a lot of live conversations, they have sentiment analysis and intent analysis, which is a really, really big one for AI. They have a lot of what they call instant insights. So they'll compare the language, body language, movement speed of hundreds of thousands of tests a day. And they'll say, people who do this usually feel this way or usually make this kind of comment. And so even if your testers don't make that comment, they'll be able to compare the behavior in a way that is a lot more helpful for someone who possibly isn't a researcher. Let's say you've democratized research to PMs or other people in the business.
That's where I was kind of thinking as an assistant, making your test even better, streamlining questions, streamlining the flows and the ways you set things up, using something like that, OpenAI to handle that kind of stuff is pretty exciting. So I imagine, like all other SaaS products out there, there's probably a skunkworks in the process to make that happen. So that's cool.
Yeah. And then I got to mention one more thing that, again, Usability Hub, they're independent. I love them, but the strength of acquisition is great for user testing. By acquiring UserZoom, they've acquired also the QX score. I think they have the trademark on this term. It is a much more comprehensive version of the SUS, which is the system usability score. So the QX score combines a number of task completion ratings with behavioral and attitudinal data. So it's kind of like getting your NPS and your satisfaction scoring combined with task completion to get an overall sense of like how much effort and how happy are customers with the overall experience. So it's like CX plus UX put together, which is super, super nice.
Okay, so now let's move on to the last item on the list, which is a repository. I know we talked before that repository is actually, in most cases, not part of the system, but is it part of user testing or Usability Hub?
Great question. So Usability Hub does not go into this route, mostly because they don't have the same diversity of test types. Usertesting.com does through acquisition of Enjoy HQ. So it's really comprehensive. I've not used it at Glovo. At Glovo, we have tried Dovetail and we have tried Rally UXR, which we love. But Enjoy HQ was an acquisition and therefore it's part of user testing and it's really, really good. So a lot of Reader's operations team love them. There's a lot of AI and machine learning functionality, really trying to make it easier for people to find stuff in the repository. That's always the biggest challenge is, at the beginning, repositories just work as like really beautiful Airtables. Everything is in the right place and linked and tagged and documented in the right folders. And it's a slight CRM functionality to which customers you talk to. But then like the real challenge is all that beautiful data, metadata, and organization needs to be like, navigable. Like if PMs want to go find some insights or the strategy team needs to go find like, a summary of what we learned the last 2 years, it should be easy. And I think Enjoy HQ does a good job at this.
I feel like we've talked about this before, Moshe, in another episode where, going back and identifying like, hey, have we done this before? Has this, in order to not to repeat something. I don't recall what episode that was, but having that repository seemed really valuable. So I'm glad we brought that up.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we will have a series about repositories, mainly because they have started as different products than user testing, and also because some of the things that they need to put in there are not from user testing specifically, but from other. And when I say user testing specifically, I don't mean the product; I mean the general. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, it was during our experimentation series. I think that's where we brought it up.
Exactly, because when you experiment, you also that's part of your repository. So there is a lot of places where you have repository items coming in.
Yeah, on this topic, I think there's something I just like mentioning it because a lot of companies struggle with this, like big, small, well-funded, not funded. Like there's a struggle of like where everything is, like I don't know if you remember like back in like if you worked in corporate, there used to be intranets, and I kind of hate them, and now I kind of miss them.
Yeah, they're still out there though.
Some of them right. Yeah, like they're just not good sometimes. Like if they were, built in whatever Microsoft. But then sometimes you're like, hey, I wish everyone just opened their laptop and like landed in the same place and then did a search. And like instead of asking me a dumb question or like where this thing is, you just did a search. And this is how I feel sometimes about UXR, especially when it comes to repositories, because I know that customer support uses Jira Help Desk, and then someone else knows that we use Braze CRM, and then someone else knows that we use UserZoom for user testing. And the repositories are not always going to capture everything, especially like not the bug reports or the App Store reviews. But I wish they did. I wish it was in one place.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. I find this is kind of a cyclic thing around. I used to develop, in client server back in the day. And to me, with the browsers, very thin browsers and thick backends and stuff like that, it's the same thing. It's client server, but it's just called differently, and the way to present it is differently. So there is always like this cyclic things about solutions we've used in the past. We try to make them better, and on the way we kind of break some things. And then we kind of miss those solutions, and then we might bring them again in a different name or a different technology, right? Who knows?
Yeah.
I
mean, if anybody's listening and they want to make a Slack bot that reads through repositories, that would be great.
There we go. Innovation.
Absolutely. Perfect. So we talked through, those main features of a user testing product or platform. Now, we always ask about what are the things you don't like about these platforms. Can you mention one for each at least?
Yep. User testing is going to be real simple. I mean, it's a hodgepodge of acquisitions, and it feels like it. You leave the product to get to other functionalities that other products have integrated. So Enjoy HQ, the repository, is completely separate, very different UX patterns, different up until a certain point, different login. And so it's just a very fragmented experience as they acquire and merge these companies into their core business. It also makes their pricing and invoicing very expensive and very cumbersome, because you can buy pieces without buying other pieces, and they don't do a great job of bundling. Like a car dealership, they're like, hey, you can't buy the spoiler without the sports engine and the brakes, because that's a logical combination. And so sometimes you'll like upgrade one thing and assume that it should come with other things, and it just doesn't. And you're like, but this is not as useful without, step 2 or whatever. So I think there's things like that. The UX is great, it's just inconsistent, right?
And for UX people, it's important.
Yes. I mean, it's always into a website of a designer, and you're like, hey, you're a product designer, you should have good UX of your own website, right?
Yep.
Who wants to spend 9 more years trying to get that website out? So and then on the UsabilityHub side, it's depth. They just lack depth. This is a cognitive choice. They've chosen to do what they do very well, and they've spent it very slowly. They have some really big clients because they do what they do really well. But I wish sometimes they had a CRM. Like all of the amazing testing that they can do automatically so rapidly means it's also a really high burden to synthesize. So they have very, very simple reports. I would love to know how many people who took a test were the same people. Like, am I just getting the same people on the panel? So I kind of wish there was like an actual CRM of like who I talked to, how exhausted or how often has this person given me feedback? Are they biasing my results? So the panel is great. I just wish there was a little bit more data depth.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. Perfect.
I know we're running up on time, but I did want to ask a question. With these 4 different products that we've reviewed, when you're thinking about a startup or a small to medium-sized business or enterprise business, do you think that one of these fits best in, if you don't have one of these products already?
Yeah, I think Usability Hub is the best for startups and nonprofits. Companies that have a lower budget, Usability Hub is great. Again, you're testing the designs before they get built by engineering. You're getting good feedback on how usable things are. You're able to do them simultaneously. It's a bit faster. It works better if you have a smaller team. So these are the benefits that really help out smaller companies, lower budgets, or startups. Usability Hub is independent, and UserZoom is also independent. And as independent products, they are both pretty affordable. UserZoom at some point will integrate into user testing completely and be only available, I assume, to user testing, who is notoriously the most expensive enterprise, targeted product.
Excellent.
Yeah. So after we covered all of these 4 products, and we also talked about which company might want to use or choose each one of them, where do you think they are going in the future?
Interesting. I think we're going to see a consolidation. I think there's going to be maybe 3 main groups of products. I mentioned in the previous episode that we moved the Glovo UX team off of Maze onto UserZoom when we had previously been on UserZoom in the past because of just like the speed of improving the products. Ironically, I think Maze has now made a bunch of improvements that we were waiting for.
You might go back.
Yeah. So UserZoom going into usertesting.com means they're going to go slower. They're going to have to do an integration period. It'll take a while and there'll be some slower development. Maze has been smart during this period of time to really start building out like a CRM and start building out like a library of templates and some deeper enterprise grade integrations and security. And that's going to make them a much stronger competitor, again, because they're independent. And so the independent players that invest now are going to be there for the future. Usability Hub probably doesn't have as much cash flow to invest, and we see them moving much slower. So if I was going to pick a tool right now from scratch, I would pick Maze.
Interesting. I guess we can probably wrap it up. I mean, that was really amazing, Kevin. We really enjoyed that talk, and I learned so much about this. Where can people reach out to you? Because I'm sure that there is, a vast of information there that we didn't tap yet, and I'm sure that you're a great resource for that and can help the community.
Certainly, yeah. I'm most active professionally on LinkedIn. Sometimes people find my Instagram and they realize it's just me on vacation. So LinkedIn is where I talk about UX and I post my talks, UX DX, for example. This podcast will be there, answer questions. In terms of like one-on-one conversations and mentorship, I'm on ADP list.
This is an awesome topic for Moshe and I to talk about. I'm always fascinated by it because it involves not only product, but it has the psychology, sociology, it has the human aspect of all of it. And so UX, UI, that stuff just really fascinates me. So learning about these products and how they can help product managers is like super insightful for me and hopefully the audience. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah. I love like, the PMs want to get more involved. I want PMs to be a bit more aware of like what it takes to get the job done. And then it makes planning better for everyone, especially when you're doing capacity planning, setting OKRs, deadlines, goals. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, you would be surprised how many companies don't have UX research or UXer at all, and how many times we have to step in and do that work or find the people that will do it for us. So either, for us to understand what it means and to find the right person, or try to do it ourselves and fail while we do it, but at least know what's available out there and who we can reach out to and ask those questions. It's really important.
Yeah, certainly. I agree.
Yep. And this is where tools like, these four can really help product managers. If we don't have that designer or that UX assistance in your team. So, and thank you. You're the first 2-time guest to have back-to-back episodes. So thank you for your availability. And this has been great. And we'll talk to everybody next time.
Yeah, love it. Thank you all.
All right. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you to all the listeners. We really appreciate the feedback and support. Please leave us a review to help others find the show on Apple or Spotify or anywhere else you're listening to the show.